Long before the present age, before empires learned the language of ruin, and before the world understood the mercy of shadow, the sky burned with a brilliance too fierce to love. The sun did not simply rise, it ruled. Scholars of forgotten centuries called it the sovereign sun, a celestial furnace whose golden heart shaped the tides, warmed the oceans, bent the seasons, and fed life into every living vein below. To priests, it was divine. To kings, it was authority. To farmers, it was both blessing and threat. But in those ancient days, the sun's gift became unbearable. Fields turned brittle beneath relentless light. Rivers thinned into threads of steam. Forests smoldered without flame, their leaves curling into blackened scripture. Even the mountains seemed to sweat molten tears beneath the unblinking sky. People stopped praying for warmth, they prayed for mercy. And far above them, in the unreachable furnace of heaven, the sovereign sun began to change. Its golden blaze deepened into crimson. Its radiance grew violent, unstable, wounded. The light no longer fell evenly across the world. It pulsed in waves, as though the star itself had begun to breathe in pain. The first astronomer priests saw the truth before anyone else. The sun was not growing stronger, it was dying. In the winter of the Red Dawn, a new light appeared at the edge of the firmament. It did not rise like a star. It bled into the sky. Slowly, night after night, a molten wound spread across the heavens, staining the horizon with amber and violet fire. The astronomer priests named it the final horizon, for it marked the place where the dying sun's essence seemed to gather before fading into darkness. Their records spoke of a terrible pattern. Each evening, the sun expanded in fury. Each morning it returned dimmer. The priests, alchemists, and warlords of the age feared the same prophecy. When the sovereign sun finally collapsed, the world would follow it into silence. Among those who studied the omen was a secretive order of glass forgers, star alchemists, and mirror priests. They did not believe the sun could be saved. Such arrogance, they said, belonged to kings and fools. But its final fury could be captured, not preserved, not healed, imprisoned. If the sun intended to die, they would bind its last roar before the heavens went cold. At the edge of a volcanic desert lived an unnamed glasswright who had watched the sun longer than most priests had served their temples. He believed the sovereign sun was not a god, nor a crown, nor an eternal flame. It was a titan of fire at the edge of exhaustion. Its brilliance was not strength, it was desperation. When the order came to him, bearing charts of the final horizon and lenses blackened by impossible light, the glasswright agreed to a task no sane artisan would accept. He would shape a vessel capable of holding the breath of a dying star. To do so, he descended into the molten veins of the earth. There, beneath stone and ash, he gathered living fire, liquid rock, radiant crystals, brass that had never cooled, and black sand that still remembered ancient sunlight. For 13 days and 13 nights, he worked beside rivers of magma. The furnace roared louder than any storm. Sand melted, metal screamed, light folded inward upon itself. On the final night, when the sky above turned the color of smoldering iron, the order focused the dying sun through 1,000 glass prisms. Mirrors of polished brass caught the fading radiance. Obsidian lenses narrowed it. Crystal chambers compressed it until the light became dense enough to tremble like liquid. Then the solar storm came. Fragments of the sun's collapsing heart fell through the firmament as spears of molten dawn. The glasswright opened the vessel, and the heavens poured fire into it. When the storm ended, the desert was glass. The order was gone. Only the glasswright remained, kneeling before the artifact he had shaped. It was no ordinary flask, no temple lamp, no royal reliquary. It was an ornate lantern forged from dark iron, mirrored brass, heat-proof crystal, an emberglass so clear it seemed almost absent. Within its walls burned a miniature dusk, a storm of molten light eternally collapsing and erupting at once. The flame did not flicker like common fire. It swelled, it stretched, it clawed outward, as though constantly trying to become a star again. The glasswright named it the Lantern of the Last Ember. Others would later call it the Cinderfall Reliquary, the emberglass of the final dawn, and the cage of the horizon. But the glasswright knew its truest name. It was not a vessel of light. It was a prison for a dying sun's final will. Inside it burned the last breath of the sovereign sun, condensed into radiant vapor and bound behind glass that no mortal furnace could have shaped. The glasswright tower carried it outside at dawn. The sky above him was strangely dim, its golden blaze softened into amber. He raised the lantern toward the horizon, and for one brief moment, the light within the vessel and the light above the world burned with the same wounded color. Then the sun slipped lower into the sky. Its brilliance thinned like the final breath of a flame. The glasswright smiled. He'd not saved the sun, but he had captured its last roar. The first warrior to unseal the lantern did so on a battlefield already lost. His shield was split, his spear was broken. Around him the ground smoked beneath falling ash, and the enemy closed in like wolves beneath a red sky. He did not drink from the lantern as one drinks water. He inhaled its heated vapor. The moment the emberlight entered his lungs, his veins filled with wildfire. For a few blazing heartbeats, he became the center of a violent sunrise. His broken spear swept outward, and its force multiplied into radiant arcs. Enemies beyond its reach were struck as though invisible flares had leapt from the weapon's edge. His steps cracked the scorched earth. His arrows split the air like fragments of solar fire. Every motion scattered power beyond mortal limits, blooming across the battlefield in widening bursts of heat and light. Those who saw him swore he did not fight like a man. He fought like a star, remembering how to explode. The lantern's gift was terrible and brief. It did not grant calm strength. It granted expansion. It turned every strike into a flare, every movement into a burst of celestial violence, every attack into the echo of a dying sun, throwing its last fire across the void. For warriors, it became a miracle. For kings, it became a weapon. For the wise, it became a warning. The lantern was never gentle. The fire inside it remembered its death. Every time its seal was broken, the bearer felt not only power, but collapse. The body became a cage too small for heaven's fury. Bones ached with pressure. Blood burned too brightly. Breath came hot and sharp, as though the lungs had filled with sunrise. The power always faded quickly. A violent bloom, a widening flare, then silence. Those who used the lantern too often began to change. Their shadows grew thin. Their eyes reflected distant horizons, even in darkness. Some heard a low celestial ringing in their sleep. Others woke with ash beneath their fingernails and burns shaped like tiny eclipses across their skin. The lantern gave overwhelming force, but only by forcing mortal flesh to imitate a star's last moment. Expansion, radiance, collapse. Many sought it for its terrible gift, the power to unleash destruction, not as a spark, but as a dying sun exploding outward. Few understood what the glasswright had understood from the beginning. The lantern did not lend its flame freely. It remembered every opening, and each awakening dimmed the ember inside by the smallest measure. Long after the glasswright vanished into legend, the surviving writings of the star alchemists were discovered beneath a ruined observatory. Most of the pages had burned without flame. Only one passage remained readable, etched into a sheet of blackened brass. The light is not immortal. The ember does not rest. The prison weakens when the flame remembers the sky. The scholars who found the inscription believed it was a warning about depletion, They thought the lantern's fire would one day fade, leaving nothing but an empty cage and the memory of a sun that once tried to burn forever. But one final line was found years later, hidden beneath the brass plate. It changed everything. The ember is not dying, it is gathering itself. The truth spread quietly among those who feared celestial relics. The lantern of the Last Ember did not merely contain the sun's final flame. It waited. Each battle fed its memory. Each release reminded the fragments of what they had once been. Every burst of radiant force taught the imprisoned fire how to expand again. The dying sun had not accepted death. It had only been divided. And inside the lantern, its fragments dreamed of becoming whole. In the last known account of the lantern, a warlord carried it to the edge of a battlefield beneath a sky without dawn. No sun rose that morning. Only a dim amber line trembled at the horizon. The warlord believed the lantern would grant him victory. He believed its final ember belonged to whoever was strong enough to wield it. He broke the seal. At first, the familiar radiance surged outward. His weapon blazed. His armor shone like molten gold. His enemies fell beneath arcs of solar fire that spread wider than any blade could reach. Then the lantern stopped burning. The battlefield went silent. For one breath, the emberglass vessel stood dark in his hand. Empty. The warlord laughed, believing he had consumed the last of its power. Then the horizon answered. A thin line of crimson light opened across the sky, wider than dawn, deeper than fire. The air bent toward it. Shadows stretched backward. Every fragment of flame the lantern had ever released seemed to turn, remember, and return. The warlord finally understood. The lantern had never been his weapon. He had been its kindling. The empty cage slipped from his hand and struck the ash-covered earth without breaking. Above him, the final horizon began to burn again. Not as sunrise, not as salvation, but as the first breath of a star that had waited ages to finish its collapse. And somewhere within that newborn blaze, the last ember of day opened its eye.